But fear is something that, if left unchecked and unbridled, can absolutely ruin your life. My question is, what's beyond that fear? What has it been holding me back from that I haven't been fully enjoying life because of it? Welcome to the Sales Made Simple podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping overwhelmed outdoor living professionals, landscapers, and hardscapers just like you increase your closing rate to over 75% without doubling your workload so you can build a seven-figure business that doesn't need you. I'm your host, Joshua Gillow. Let's dig in. Fear. It's something that plagues us each and every day. It's part of the human experience. We fear things in order to make sure we stay safe. We fear things in order to make sure our children and our loved ones stay safe. But fear is something that, if left unchecked and unbridled, can absolutely ruin your life. And when it comes to fear, most of the time, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. It's more story, more bark than bite. There's certain fears that we have that are healthy fears. Healthy fears in the sense that, you don't want to get too close to the edge of a cliff if it's a muddy, sloppy mess outside, because you could fall and hurt yourself or die. Not to drive too fast in a car, because when you get to a certain point, you start feeling the fear. It's to slow down and to stay in control. There's certain fears in our life that are very good, very good. When you're carrying a loaded weapon, to make sure you know how to handle it, because somebody could get killed. These fears are good fears, but there's so many fears that lurk in our minds and in our hearts, from stories that loved ones have poured on us over the years. Maybe it's your mother told you something, and your father's fear that they cast on you and you don't even know it. And now you're scared of the same thing that they are. But for what reason? Is that really true for you? And for me, growing up, one of my big fears that I've never really focused or faced, it's a better way to say it, was the fear of swimming in deep water. And when I was a kid, we would play in a swimming pool, above ground swimming pools, and you could always touch the bottom. It wasn't all that scary. And we would swim in ponds or in rivers where we could touch the bottom, and that was just never a problem. And I perfected the doggy paddle. That one was the best one that I could do. I never learned how to properly swim. That kept me above water, and then I avoided the water at all costs, but nobody knew that about me. I just always was the guy that wasn't really in the mood to go swimming. So I let that fear live rent-free in my head for most of my life. And I'm 46 years old now, and I'm starting to go back and look at my life and look at the different fears that I have and said, holy moly, this one's been living in there for a long time. And I remember when I first met my wife 20 years ago, we went to a little place up in New York State in the Catskills. It's called Mohonk Mountain House, and they have a beautiful sky lake there, which means that all the water comes from the sky, and there's really no like springs or anything to it, but just this big, beautiful, open, deep water lake. And she's from Germany and loves to swim and all that stuff. And I was not willing to tell her when we were first dating that I was scared of the water. So, as most men listening would probably understand, I was like, forget it. I'm just going to go in there and do my best. And, hopefully I don't drown. I would never tell her that I was scared of the water. So we got in, and it seemed like a football field across, which I know it wasn't, but it sure seemed that far across. And she gets in and she does her breaststroke across, like with no issue whatsoever. And she looks back to the bank, and I'm standing there like, oh, it's go time, bro. Let's go. So I jump in and start doggy paddling my tail off across. And man, it took everything for me to get across that lake. And by the time I got to the other side, I felt like I just got done running a marathon. And I have the fear of drowning, the fear of not knowing what's underneath me, the fear of not knowing if I could do it. That fear was just screaming at me. And I got to the other side, and I'm like, I survived. That was, my wife looks at my girlfriend at the time. She looks at me and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, that's the longest I've ever swum across any lake in my life. She's like, really? And she's not even panting. And I'm thinking, wow, what is going on? I'm like, is it just me trying to stay above water, or is it the fear in my head? But man, that fear was so powerful. And then she smiles at me and she says, all right, let's head back across the lake again. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, are you out of your effing mind? Are you crazy? You think I'm going to go back and do that again? And well, you know how it is when you're dating a girl and you really love her and want to impress her, you'll do just about anything. So I was like, all right, let's go. And back across we went. I got to the other side, and that fear was just screaming in my head again. Got to the other side. I said, I'll never do that again. I'm not doing that. So for many years, so we, not years, but we dated, then eventually got married about a year later. And all the time between then and now, which is almost 20 years, I just stay out of the water. I just don't do it. We go to the beach. She goes out and likes to swim. I'll stand on the side and watch her. Like I've always found ways that it's not a big deal, but never ways to face that fear. Because it's scary. It's scary. Those fears of drowning, those fears of going out there and making a fool of yourself, of all of that were so overpowering. I say all of that because, listeners, I'm not here to bore you with a bunch of stories, but there's a lesson in all of this. And 3 years ago, when I started to be the scoutmaster at our local Boy Scout troop, and my son signed up, and the other leadership's kids were moving on and they needed help. So we jumped in, another father and myself, we jumped in, and I became scoutmaster. And first year in that, we go to a summer camp. And that summer camp, you have to pass a swim test. And I was like, oh man, I've been so good at avoiding this in the past. Let's see if I can avoid it now. So the first year, I ended up talking my way out of not swimming for the test because I'm a quote unquote adult, which can swim. I'm just not going to prove it to everybody right now. I don't want to. And somehow I got away with it. So I breathed a sigh of relief and said, I can kick that can down the street a little further. Well, the problem is the next year came along and all the adults were doing the test and I couldn't get away with it anymore. And I got to the edge of the pool and we had to do 6 laps in like a 40-foot long pool back and forth without, touch the side when you get to the other side and go back right away. It has to be consistent. And it's, in this case, was 5 laps of whatever stroke you want, breaststroke or freestyle or whatever you want to get across. And then it's a backstroke in the way back and then a float. So I'm sitting here on the side thinking like, man, that whole fear came back up. That whole lake experience came back up for me. And my heart was pounding out of my chest. I had every single excuse for not doing it, trying to talk my way out of it again. So not everybody, my entire troop, including the young children that are there watching those young men, wouldn't see their leader struggling with something that everyone around me had no clue about because I kept that very near and dear. Even my wife didn't realize how fearful I was of water. So the time came, I jumped into the pool and I did my whatever pseudo breaststroke, doggy paddle, stay above water, swim stroke. And I got across the first time, back across the second time, back across the third time. Man, I was just panting out of my mind. And it wasn't because I didn't have the skill or the cardio. Like I run all the time, I bike, I do all of that stuff, ruck. So the cardio is not the problem, but the fear in my head was burning all of the energy. And then add that to that, the fact that I was holding my breath and like all of these things. So I'm telling you this story because I did survive that. I just made it in a swimmer and got out and said, you know what? That was so embarrassing that I was in front of other adult leaders and all of these young men. And I'm like, I need to change something. The time has come that I need to finally do something about this. And I said, what's the first thing I need to do? First thing I need to do is I need to get clarity on why I'm doing it, right? Okay. Because clarity builds confidence and confidence can move mountains. So clarity is because I don't want to be scared of water anymore. My question is, what's beyond that fear? What has it been holding me back from that I haven't been fully enjoying life because of it? So I have a really good friend named Brett, and we ended up vacationing together that same summer. That was last summer. And there's a swimming pool there. And I said, Brett, you're a college level swimmer. And I said, can you please teach me how to swim? I'm a 46 at that time, 45-year-old man, 46 now, that I don't know how to swim. And he says, absolutely. So we spent an entire week at this place and he showed me how to swim. He showed me and then we learned. I learned and then I did it and added a bunch more different strokes. So we focused on like breaststroke and then we focused on the freestyle and backstroke. Those are the ones that we start. And so he just went through it step by step by step by step, broke it down to the simplest fundamental pieces. And by the end of that week, my confidence went from very, very, very low, extreme fearfulness to holy moly, I can do this. And what changed for me, listeners, and why I'm sharing all of this about you with you and being extremely vulnerable right now is because all of us have fears deep down inside. We all do. And what I learned over this process is that when we face our fears, when we look them square in the eye and we move forward with clarity of why and what to do next, we put a strategy in place and we start executing on it. That fear, once we get past it, becomes the greatest treasure of our life, because that fear no longer lives inside and no longer lives inside of me after that weekend. So after that, I have this new courage, this new excitement to swim. My wife's excited because now we can swim together. She's used to me standing on the side watching her swim. So we ended up vacationing and we were by the ocean, and we were swimming, and I was like, it wasn't saltwater where I learned, it was freshwater. So your body's heavier, and I'm 150 pounds soaking wet. I don't have a whole lot of flotation built into me, if you know what I mean. So with that being the case, we get to this salt water, and I start swimming, and I'm like, I'm learning. I'm going back and doing all the strokes that I was taught by Brett, and it was so much fun. I loved being out there in the ocean and swimming. It was so great, and I was so proud of myself. My wife was so proud of me. This is amazing. I'm like, I finally figured this out. This fear that was holding me back about water, now I can finally engage it and enjoy it. And so we enjoyed that. We swam and floated and did all of that stuff. And I just felt like this release, this like there was this stone hand clutching my heart around swimming. And all of a sudden it's eased up to the point where I can barely feel it. I'm like, wow, this is great. I say all of that because we eventually ended up in a freshwater lake, and I was getting a little cocky. So we went out swimming, and I didn't realize how much more buoyancy is added by the salt. And man, I struggled swimming, but I went back to what I learned, and I kept pushing forward, and I kept pushing forward and kept pushing forward. And eventually there was a lot of current. There was a lot of wind. There wasn't a lot of places to get off, like to get out of the water. So it was going back to freaking my mind, and I had to manage that. I got back to the dock, and I was freaking out, and I got back to the dock, and I was like, this is not going to beat me. So I got back after about 5 minutes of rest. I got back in the water and just kept swimming. I just kept going, and just to beat that fear out of me. And I say that to you guys, not to try to impress you, but to impress upon you this idea that those fears are there. Yes, we acknowledge them, but we don't have to live by the rules. We don't have to live by the amount of restriction they provide in your life that they hold you back from, right? So when it comes to fear being a mile wide and an inch deep, think about fears that are going on in your life. What are you afraid to face? Is it a conversation? Is it a new system in your business? Is it a conversation with your child or your wife? Is it something that you've always had fear toward, but didn't know how to get around it? The path forward is through. You must go through this fear, just as I did with all the swimming. And you know what the crazy part is? When you do that and you push through, you build this understanding, this awareness, this trust inside yourself that no matter how hard things get and those really, really tough fears, if you're willing to look them in the eye, because the greatest treasures of our life are right beyond that fear. And what I've learned now is I'm certified in scuba diving, deep sea scuba diving. I love to swim. I really enjoy it now. I was just out this morning in a pool doing the same amount of laps that I had to do the first time I went to that swim test for the Boy Scouts. I do that as a practice run now, all because I faced it after 46 years. So listeners, if you're thinking about some part of your business, maybe it's sales, that you're scared. Like, man, I'm just tired of being rejected. I'm tired of the anxiety that comes with selling. I'm just tired of all of that. I think the answer is on the other side of that fear, because maybe it's the fact you don't like it, or maybe the fact that you're scared. And I was scared most of my life and held it inside of me and told nobody about it. Nobody knew about this. So what I'd love for you guys to do is look in your life and think about, where am I scared? Be honest with yourself. And how can I get through it? How can I face that for the first time? Because like I said before, fear is something you have to face and move through. You can't go around it because it will always be there, like that monster living in your closet, just waiting to come out and provide doubt in your heart that you can't do a certain thing. Perhaps for you, it's growing your business and you don't know how, and you're afraid that others will see that you don't know how if you push too far or too hard. Maybe it's time for a mentor. Maybe it's time to start integrating systems. Perhaps that's your path forward. But I'm here to tell you that if I can get around one of my biggest fears in my life, which was the water, if I can do that, this guy from the cornfields of Pennsylvania who didn't have a whole lot of time to swim as a kid, never taught, if I can do that, what can you do? What can you do? All these things are learnable. All these things, all these fears are defeatable. You're stronger than those fears. You've got a lot more resistance and resilience in you than you ever knew possible. But the only way you're ever going to find that out and develop the courage and the confidence that's going to help you take your business or your life to the next level is by facing those fears and not letting them talk you into doing what you've always done. Facing them, being like, you know what, I'm going to be courageous today. I'm going to lead with courage because I know. But the way you get courage is by defeating enemies. And enemies are those fears. When you face them and you say, not today, Satan, not today. We're going to move through that. And if I don't know how yet, I'm going to hire somebody. I'm going to find somebody. I'm going to watch a YouTube video. I'm going to read something that helps me get through this, because it's not that you can't do it. It's just that you don't know how yet. So my question to you listeners is, what's your deep water? What's something that you feared most of your life that you can finally decide to look in the eye and push past? Because all the treasure is on the other side of finally pushing past that fear. Guys, thank you for listening. Talk to you next week.